This week, I am proud to note that Nautel is sponsoring us. Nautel is all about delivering worry-free transmission for broadcasters, and they know that whenever broadcasters are sharing ideas and knowledge, good things will happen. And that's why they have their Tuesday transmission talk sessions hosted by Jeff Welton. And they invite you to be there or take advantage of the videos, hundreds of videos and resources they now have on their website. And as a closing thought here to worry-free transmission, their new GV series transmitters updated. Any of them purchased by the end of October are eligible for a free second exciter, just one less thing to worry about. And so that's our friends at Nautel. This afternoon, we are thrilled. I am personally thrilled to have Conrad Trautmann, the former Senior Vice President of Technology. Now you're now the Vice President of Technology and Operations. No, you're the Chief Technology Officer now.
Yes.
You've got to get new business cards.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, with that announcement went out this week. So
that's great. Chief Technology Officer at Cumulus, and a really veteran of our industry, well known. And I've really looked forward to this. He volunteered to talk to us about WFAS and the work that went into turning this into a digital AM station. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to you, Conrad, and let's see what we got.
All right, Barry, thank you. And I certainly appreciate you inviting me to join you on your Thursday luncheon here. I've popped into a few other ones, and I always find these very informative. So I'm glad that I could be the subject of the presentation today. So I am going to do a quick screen share of my PowerPoint. I'll make sure this goes. Please let me know if it's showing up.
Yep.
Okay. So as I started to say earlier, when Barry asked me to join the call, I was like, what am I going to say? We flipped WFAS to all digital operation, and I figured the best way to do it is to just tell the story. So I put some slides together, and I'm hoping I can get them to advance. Here we go. So Dave Kolasar is on the call today. He's joined us, and I made this the very first slide because Dave was definitely the trailblazer, the first one on the air with MA3 in experimental mode. And here's a picture of him standing in front of his transmitter, and to the right, his phasing unit, which is way more complicated than the one you'll see that's running WFAS. But we went down to visit him I had to look it up. It was the summer of 2019. We took, it was Dave Suplee from our Harrisburg market and myself drove from Harrisburg down to Frederick, Maryland. And we were just absolutely blown away at how well that signal traveled. It made it almost to the border of Maryland and Pennsylvania, and solid all the way down. And it was sounding like the best stream or an FM station, and we were surprised at the resiliency of that signal. Probably better than an FM equivalent, because there was no multipath, and it held up underneath power lines and bridges and everything else. So I was like, we have to do this at Cumulus. We have to give it a try. So WFAS was our candidate, and we picked this station for a few reasons. One, it was widely known that Cumulus sold off the stations that we operated in New York City. WPLJ went to EMF, and WNSH went to Odyssey, what's now called Odyssey. So we were left with this little AM radio station sitting here in White Plains. We had been running it from our Bridgeport market, which we sold to Kolasar around the same time as all those other transactions. So it was sitting here just basically unattended, running network programming and having 0 ratings, and we had a stream up and running and no one was listening to the stream. It had no listeners at all. So I threw this picture in here that I thought this was interesting. This photograph is from a 1951 program schedule that somebody found and sent to the radio station that happened to be on site, of the humongous transmitter that they had in there. This room still exists. Where this guy's sitting, they actually put a couple of studios in here, but this room is gonna, you'll see this in the pictures later. And you know, it's just stunning to me that we can, you know, have a radio station broadcasting out of a you know, cabinet the size of your refrigerator at your house or smaller. And you know, this is what used to be there. But here's a little history of, I won't go through all of these bullets, but the radio station was on a frequency of 1210 back in 1926, where it shared with 2 other stations. And you know, the big move was in 1946, they moved it over from White Plains to Secor Road, which is the current address. It was 2.5 miles away from the original location. And then they went up to 1 kilowatt, had a Gates BC1T. Then this was also interesting. They had a Collins 820D gate. The Gates was the aux. When I took over the station, the 820D was still there. They were actually running a BEAM1 or AM1A, I think, you know, as the main transmitter, but the Collins was still sitting in the rack room. So then they had a self-supporter tower that they took down, and they put up a guide tower 450 feet. And then in 1988, they put a folded unipole skirt on the tower in order to ground the tower to sell space to, I think it was Nextel at the time, to put cellular telephone on it. So, and then you can see on May 24th of this year is when we switched it to full-time MA3. So here's the old radio station sign out front. 103.9 WFAS was the FM that was here. That got moved into New York. It broadcasts from the Bronx now. And then, you know, the AM is still here. This is the old rack room. And then, yeah, BEAM1A was the main transmitter. This should give all of you, you know, make the hair stand up on your arms. This was what was behind the racks in the rack room. And then here again was, you know, the transmitters. This is just years and years and years of things coming in and getting, you know, built up and not removed. All of this has been removed. And in fact, I'll tell this story real quick, is that we had copper wires coming in from the street that we wanted to switch to fiber. And our contract engineer, Bud Williamson, he told the phone company to use the copper as the pull cord for the fiber. So we literally have no copper in this building anymore from the phone company. It is now 100% fiber. So we rebranded the radio station to AM 1230 Digital, New Talk for New York. We came up with a logo, and I'll just point out that the logo here includes the HD logo, and you can see it in the 0. We got permission from Ubiquity to do that because we wanted to, you know, promote the fact that this is all digital and it's on the AM. Here's the new sign out front, and then you can see here's the actual building, and then the tower is in the back here. It's kind of hard to see behind the tree, but we have a new website and new programming lineup. Here's our Nautel transmitter coming off the truck and coming into the front lobby of the building. And again, you know, we wheeled it in on a hand cart. That's how you know, small the transmitter is. And then in order to broadcast HD, we needed to make some modifications to the antenna. So we had Tom Jones actually modeled it for us, and determined that we needed to stand the skirt off the tower to 36 inches. It was currently at, before we did all of this, it was at 16 inches off the tower. So you can see in these photos, these are fiberglass rods that actually adjust, they attach to the tower, and then they have, holders for the skirt. And from 150 feet down to the ground, we pushed it out the extra, 20 inches or so. Here's the tower. Is that me making these annotations?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize that. I apologize. Let me clear that. No, I can't figure it out. So we're going to have a little squigglies on the screen. Sorry about that. So anyway, this is the 450-foot tower. These are the standoffs. And this is the crew that actually did the work for us. We had a beautiful sunny day, and they came out and did all of that. So that leads us to, this is the new rack room. We brought in some new racks. Here's the transmitter. It actually goes up into a switch that has a switch between a dummy load and the actual antenna. And it's a little bit difficult to see on the screen, but we actually are running 1200 watts forward to make the correct base current readings out at the tower. So that was our first time firing the transmitter up. Here's some chicken scratch that I did that I thought you'd be interested in. This is the original ATU that we took over, and there's big coil in here and another coil in the center, and then a few caps. And this was the air chain, which was our AM1A, went into this transfer switch, which was in the building. And then out at the ATU, we had, the circuit breaker, which you can see over on the left there, a coil, another coil to ground with the tap, the capacitor here, a couple more caps in parallel, and then out to the antenna and into the unipole. And where this is kind of interesting is this was the sweep that we did on the antenna before we made any changes. So typically, you want to see 50 J0. That's what everybody says. 50 ohms and J0 on the impedance. You can see that at 1230, it's right in the center. This is 1222 and 1224 here. So 1230 is like right in the center of these boxes where my mouse is. The resistance was, pretty close to 50 ohms. Here's the 50 line right here. So at 1230, it's pretty dead on. The impedance wasn't not quite the J0 that we want, or actually right in the center. It was close. But the issue is that the sidebands were not 50 J0. This is not flat at all. So we ended up redesigning the ATU. And here's a couple of photos of what it looks like now. And the components, capacitor on the input, this gigantic coil over here, and then these three caps on the output. So this is the fixed cap. Here's the coil. And then these three caps were variable. And we spent probably a couple of hours on the phone with Tom dialing this in. And this was the computer for the consultant, Bill Weeks, that helped us do this. And now you can see what we have. It's a little more friendly to an HD signal, where here's your 50 ohms, which is dead on at 1230, which is the center line, and then at 1225 and 1235, just starts to roll off, and then here's your J0 line, which is the impedance is pretty flat across the band. So that was what we were looking for. Oh, and this is a snapshot of the Smith chart that's built into the software that Nautel has. And you can see this is 50 ohms and J0 pretty much right in the middle.
Quick question.
Yes.
So that tower is pretty tall for this frequency. What's the impedance sweep of that look like, or do you have that?
I don't. We didn't. We wanted to keep it grounded. So, I mean, this was, at I'll go back, see if I can make it go back. This sweep was at the input to the ATU. but we didn't sweep. I think we may have swept the tower, but I didn't include the diagrams here for us, so I apologize
Yeah.
for that.
No, that's no problem. It seems like, what is that, like a half wave or something? It's really unusually tall, I would think, for that frequency.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. It's 450 feet. And we used, like I said, we used about 150 foot of it as the radiator. Everything above 150 feet, the skirt is grounded.
Yeah, yeah. I think that probably just determines the impedance of the skirt, whereas probably the whole tower is still radiating. But thank you.
Okay. So we, as I said, we rebranded on May 24th. We switched the format, and we had a little bit of, here's what was going on prior to May 24th. We were running CBS Sports Radio Monday through Sunday, 24/7. The signal reached, somewhere in the order of 10 to 15 miles. Within that 10 to 15 miles, it was about 4 million people in population, and that we pulled off of our VSoft software. And then our streaming was very low, and then Nielsen had no entries. So we rebranded, we put this format on. This is all Westwood One programming. America in the Morning and First Light, The Chris Plant Show, Dan Bongino, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Rich Eisen, Jim Bohannon in the evening, and then we do Red Eye Radio overnight. So that is what we launched with. Here's a map that we put in this deck. What you're looking at here is the 2 millivolt curve and the half mil curve. And the easiest way to explain this is that the grade A or city grade signal, when it was in an analog, was the red curve. Clearly with the digital, it's now the blue curve. There's no doubt about it. When you went an analog between the red and the blue, it got noisy, and past the blue, you were in no man's land where, only an engineer would try to listen, and you would be lucky if you could hear anything. But with the switch to MA3, we absolutely pushed this city grade, fantastic sounding signal out to the blue curve, which is the half mil. It does make it past that in some areas to the north for sure. And then I live up here in Trumbull, Connecticut, which is north of Bridgeport. It definitely pushes past Norwalk up into Westport. But what I tell people is that when you get to the edge of that signal, it falls off like a cliff. There is no hoping that you're going to hear it again. It's just gone. You might get a burp or a little, and remember, this is 1,000 watts, right? It's not a super strong signal, but anywhere within the blue. And I will also qualify it by saying, this is showing it covering New York City. When you get into New York, the man-made noise is just too much for it to handle, but it does make it all the way down the west side through the Bronx and all the way to the George Washington Bridge before it's gone. You go under the GW, it's like that cliff, and you can't hear anything on the other side of it. But, we have New York City coverage, which is pretty amazing. Here's another, this is a VSoft plot of basically the same two curves. When we did the launch, we got some press. So covered by Inside Radio, Radio Inc., Radio World. And we even got some local news coverage from Westchester and Fairfield County. And then Radio World did a little expose on it. And Barry asked me to say, what kind of response are we getting? So people tuned in because they wanted to hear that format, and we got a lot of people emailing us about how to pick it up. But here's just a few people that were tuning it in. We have one guy that was he tests vehicles for a living, and he said that he was able to get it in places that he was surprised. He talked about some of our programming where, since it's all coming from the network, we had some transcoding issues that, on some programming you could hear a little bit of, transcoding artifacts. but people saying that the audio sounds good, where some of the other stations in the market were fading and subject to electrical noise, we were, surviving that. And then, some folks were surprised at how far it goes. So, and then, I put some names of some folks that are here that helped us to get the project done. So of course, Tom did the modeling, like I said, and helped us to dial it in. Dave was super tech support. Anytime I got stuck, I called Dave up and he was right on the phone and helping me out. Because, one of the things that you find when you're doing this is that since it's not really been done before, there aren't a lot of people you can go to ask questions. And Dave, having had a lot of experience with it, was, really very nice to help us, get through some of the little gotchas that we were working on. At Xperi, Joe D'Angelo and Ashraf Eldeniri and Donna Detweiler, George Sanat, Mike Raid, all were super helpful for us to, make this happen. When I was working through the problems with Nielsen, just to make sure that, our encoders were set properly, that the decoders were working the right way. Some of you may know Lee at Nielsen. He was a huge help. Mark Lipp is our corporate attorneys at Fletcher, Heald and Hildreth. Gary Mantufel and Alex Hartman. Alex Hartman was the on-site tech that came out to help us to turn the transmitter on and dial it in, and he was fantastic, very knowledgeable. Bud Williamson and Bill Weeks from Digital Radio Engineering actually did the clean out of that room, the electrical work that needed to happen, all of the antenna work, and manage the tower crew and everything, and put in the racks and wired the remote controls and all. And then MyCab was the tower company, and Not Limited was the company that made those standoffs that I was showing in the earlier pictures. And then, Geneva King at Kintronics helped us to get the parts. So the parts that were in the ATU were not cheap. I will say that, it's they're professional commercial grade, components. So we actually had some from some other radio stations that we had either made changes to or taken off line. Like I think some of the components came from Washington, DC when we put WMAL on another tower. So we were able to reuse some things, but we needed to supplement that with components we didn't have. And Kintronics was the place to go and got us everything we needed. So anyway. I think, yeah, that was all I had for today. I'm happy to field any questions.
Conrad, this is Tom King. I wanted to ask about
Tom.
the power monitoring to the antenna. Are you using a thermocouple meter for that, or how are you monitoring the power feed to the tower?
We actually put a through line, not a meter in the line. So we used one of those circuit breaker, the posts, and we wired a meter that we bought from Kintronics. So it's not the inductive meter; it's an inline meter. And then we figured out what the impedance or resistance of the tower was after we got through with all the antenna work, and that's what we used to determine how to get to 1,000 watts.
Conrad, this is Dave.
Thank you.
I was wondering, has there been any improvement in listenership since you said listenership was down to 0?
So there has been, and what we did was we asked the folks at Nielsen to take a look to see if they were getting any meters on it. And while it's not enough to have bumped us in the ratings in the New York market, because there's, of course, many meters and lots of competition there, we were able to get confirmation from Nielsen that there were actually people listening over the air as well as to our streams, and we have the streams encoded. So
It's also on a FM translator, and is it encoded separately?
No translator, so no separate encoding.
Okay.
But the encoding on the stream is different than the encoding on the over the air, so they can determine the difference.
What seems to be, Ted Langdell in California, what seems to be the difference in listenership between AM and streaming?
Streaming more. I don't want to get into specifics as far as, giving out stats that I'm not allowed to give out since I'm not in the programming department, but there's definitely, a lot of people streaming it.
I suspect smart speakers are doing a lot of that.
Yes.
As Chris says, I'm curious if you have any.
Okay, we got some doubling here. Bill, how about if we let you go first?
Okay, sure. Conrad, this is Bill, maybe. Do you know what's available, if any, for in-home radios and receivers for AMHD?
I did do some research on that. Yeah, so we checked with the folks at Xperi, and they had done an independent study of the number of receivers that were currently in the market to be able to be listened to. So the part one of the answer to your question is that there's somewhere on the order of around 40% of all of the vehicles in the New York market are equipped to be able to hear the station. So if they tune it in, they can get it. As far as at home, there aren't a ton of options. If you go on Amazon.com, I'm trying to remember the name of the manufacturer of the radio, but there's 2 or 3 different models of radios you can buy, somewhere in the order of like $70 to $100 that have AM HD decoding capability. But I was disappointed to see that a lot of the manufacturers have not been including that in what they're building. And I actually called up one US manufacturer to see if they were considering the possibility of putting them in, and they said that they had done it in early models but had pulled it out. So it's a little bit difficult, but the story is that pretty much everybody is streaming, and so as somebody said earlier, the smart speakers seem to have taken the place of the in-home radio, and that's where we're seeing quite a few people tuning us in.
On existing automotive HD radios, is this receivable on everyone ever sold, or only recent ones, or
in fact,
backward compatibility?
I think Alex was the one that pointed out to me that this could still be picked up by a CQAM receiver. It's compatible all the way back to that. So yes, the answer is, at least I've been told, that every AM HD that's out there can tune this in.
Chris, I think we got you on standby.
Yeah, I think my question was about, you mentioned in the slides that some ringingness was noted, which you attributed to transcoding. Have you made any attempts with processing to try to minimize that? Because I know on the old system, sometimes you could tweak, not push the top so hard, and that would tend to go away a little bit.
We did. We went back to the program producer and we asked them if they could do anything to help us out, because we're in the network business as well, of course, Cumulus, and we know that especially during the pandemic, a lot of people were remote. They were using not the best quality connections to get back to their home base for the production, and then you had multiple levels of digital transmission that encode, decode. So yeah, we did make some adjustments to the audio because we had a few complaints in the first week or so about certain programs, and we think we fixed it. So
Conrad, we have a note here, kind of an interesting one here. Would be interesting to see MA3 on a 50 kilowatt non-D to see what the coverage is, especially at night. Any tests that you're aware of that have been run on something like that?
no, not at that power level.
On coverage, has anyone just driving around with a receiver logging with GPS and just gathering a huge set of data?
We haven't done that. I mean, I've done it myself with my own car, you know, just to see what the before and afters were like. We can put the transmitter in back to analog mode if we choose to. We of course we don't, but you know, before we actually made the switch, I went out with the car that I have that has an HD radio in it, and you know, did some drive tests, and then of course after we switched, I did the same drives, and that's partly how I determined the real world, you know, the 1/2 mil, 2 mil thing. So.
Conrad, I know audio processing is important in the market, especially in the New York area. What did you have to do to reimagine audio processing for an all digital station? You
can't push it. It's like a stream. it will fall apart if you try to push it. You know, it's a talk format. We're running a Telos Omnia 9 that we had on the shelf there that we dialed in, and I think we're using one of the aggressive talk presets or whatever, but it really is sensitive. You can't you know, try to be the loudest on the dial type of thing. But I will say this is that if you are in our, you know, within our grade A where you're picking the station up and then you dial it up and do the, you know, what all of us broadcast engineers do, A/B comparisons against everyone else, because the quality is full bandwidth, it just sounds so much better than every other AM on the dial. The closest we have to us is 1010 Winds, which is running hybrid mode. And so when you tune them in, they start off in analog and then they blend into the digital. And it will, you know, their hybrid digital doesn't sound quite as good in my opinion. This is just me, but as the WFAS signal. So I don't know that you need to you know, play the audio war game here. I think just switching it to the all digital and having that full bandwidth sound, you know, gives you an edge.
That brings up a question on receiver capture time. How long do people hear dead air? And also what's adjacent channel interference like?
The capture time is like 2 or 3 seconds. It's like shoo, comes right in. The further out you get, it takes a hair bit longer. But it is very fast, and it's faster than I thought it would be, to be honest with you. And then we're, you know, I had the station off, and I was trying to listen to see who might be coming in on top of me. The only place where I had somebody close was up near Poughkeepsie. That was, you know, when I was tuning up and down, like, you know, to 1220 or 1240, or yeah, because we're 1230. You know, they were loud and up in that northern area, but everywhere else, I didn't detect anybody, you know, getting into us. And as far as the actual the signal itself, the 1230, when you're up near that 1220, it holds up. It's not getting beat up or destroyed. It's just, my experience has been when you get to that cliff, you know, that edge of the signal, it's just gone, and it's, you know, there's no recovering it from there.
About interference to other stations, I understand the bandwidth here is smaller than in the hybrid mode. Is that correct?
It is, and I wish now that you mentioned that, I had a great slide that demonstrates it, that I stole from David Layer.
This is power measurement as far as using a spectrum analyzer. As you can see, you shut the digital off so that there's just a simple unmodulated carrier, and measure the channel power from the spectrum analyzer you get your channel power measurement. Turn the digital on, adjust your transmitter power output until you achieve the same channel power in the spectrum analyzer. However, there's a much easier way to do this. And it's really what I call the old is new again. Let me go there. Thermocouple ammeters are the best. You can buy them for $5 at a Hamfest. Any AM station built prior to 1960 probably has a ton of these laying on a shelf somewhere. And it's really the best way because it's really truly average. It's just the power heating up a resistor, doing the work and making that current measurement. And then once you get the current measurement, it's a simple matter of Ohm's law, power equals I squared R. So 3 amps. In this case, this is the nighttime, it's 460 watts. It's 3 amps. So that's 9 amps, or 9 squared times 50. That's 450 watts.
Yeah, we didn't get any complaints from anybody else when we went on, no issues.
Thank you. I just related to the question about the bandwidth, Conrad. So, what is the licensing changes that had to happen to run it in digital? And does this push less energy out of the sidebands then?
I'm having a tough time making Bill out.
Yeah, his microphone's a little distorted.
I'll try to, maybe if I talk quieter. I have problems with this microphone. So, what are the FCC licensing changes required to run this in all digital? And how much is there less energy out in the sidebands with the digital analog?
I think he's asking you about the how much there is in the sidebands.
Yeah, compared to analog AM, and what's the FCC say in that area?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you on that.
Yeah, I was just wondering, with that old ATU, you were just running analog audio and not the HD before?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. Otherwise, I was wondering how it would work with that bad of tuning. So.
Yeah, no, we didn't even attempt it.
Even the analog with that asymmetry wouldn't sound great. And I did calculate it out. The tower is 0.562 wavelengths high. So it's interesting.
Conrad, could you comment on the effects of ambient noise on reception in the highly urbanized areas, analog versus digital?
So I will tell you that on digital, one of the people I had listening to the station for me actually commutes from Long Island to White Plains in his car. He has an HD, and he said that it's good from the Cross Island Parkway and up over the bridges and stuff. When he gets into downtown White Plains, which has a number of high-rise buildings and it's a small city, it does get the signal beat up a bit down there, and that is the city of license, and it can be affected by the man-made noise in those areas. As far as my own experience of having driven the analog signal a number of times, I'm currently sitting here in the World Trade Center area of Manhattan right now, and I would travel down the West Side Highway to get here, and I could take it to the Intrepid Museum, which is at 42nd Street, in analog. But again, it was the kind of signal that only an engineer would want to listen to. If you were trying to listen to the station as a regular listener, you wouldn't have wanted to listen to it that far down. And even though I could get it, it was in analog mode. It was getting pretty noisy, when you got into the Bronx. With the digital, as I said, it's solid all the way through the Bronx and into northern Manhattan until you get to the George Washington Bridge, which is the northern part of the Manhattan Island here. But it's all the way to that cliff. It's rock solid, great sounding audio, and then it goes away. So you're sacrificing maybe a little bit of coverage area. I could have gotten it further in analog, but there was nobody wanting to listen to it that far down. In going with the digital signal down into Manhattan, I'm getting a very listenable, clear signal all the way to the cliff.
What's it like at nighttime?
I was afraid someone would ask me that. I don't have a good answer there. I have had a few reception reports that said in the city of license and nearby, you can pick it up. Sangean, that's the name of the radio that I was trying to think of before. I had a friend of mine with a Sangean portable in a hotel in the White Plains area who was able to get it clearly. It doesn't go as far, I can tell you that much. And when it gets dark, then you start to get some of the noise that, I apologize, somebody was trying to dial me. You don't get as good a coverage at night as you do during the day. And I don't have a really good gauge or guideline to tell you what the difference is, because I haven't had the time to come up with those answers on my own. So
Is the station also a kilowatt at night?
it is. Dave, did you have something?
Yeah, if I may interject, I can speak a little bit in terms of MA3 performance at night. What you want to take a look at is your nighttime interference-free contour and half that. So for instance, at WWFD, our NIF is calculated to be 10.8 millivolts. So as a result, we have found that our nighttime MA3 coverage is reliable to half that value, so 5.4 millivolts. And typically what happens right at sunset or pattern change, we can go out much further than that, but coverage never retreats further inward than the half NIF contour. So that may be a good limit to your marketable coverage if you have a consultant draw up your half NIF contour.
Great. Thank you for bailing me out on that one. Appreciate it. See, I told you Dave's helpful. He's still helping me.
Conrad, Mr. Moats would like to ask you about the topology of your Nielsen encoding, where in the flow it's happening, and is it causing any kind of issues?
So that's a good question. And we have an Omnia 9, and Lee Dennis, as I mentioned earlier, who helped us, was all excited over the fact that they now have encoding that you can embed into the audio processor. It turns out that our audio processor was an earlier version of the audio processor and could not support that functionality. So what we have done is inserted our encoder into the insert point of the Omnia 9. So it's basically audio into the Omnia, then it loops out in the insert point, which the insert point, I believe, is on the back end of the audio processing, and then it's reinserted back into the audio processor with the encoded audio, and then out to the transmitter and AES digital.
Anyone else have a question for Conrad or Dave, who's still listening?
What does the Nielsen processing sound like, or has it really changed the audio component? I know that there are some AM stations that are not HD where it kind of sounds like they're in a barrel. One of our
I'll say this: if you adjust the levels in and out properly as the recommended, you can hear it. What I think you'll hear where PPM encoding can potentially damage or hurt the way the audio sounds is when people are using these Voltaires and boosting it to like 3 times the level that it's supposed to be. So, you know, we have some zealous program directors that like turn my Voltaire all the way up. You know, when you do that, you end up with artifacts in the audio that are definitely just, you know, you can hear. But we're not using a Voltaire. It's just your plain old enhanced CBET PPM encoder.
I'm not super familiar with the mechanics of the HD radio and the encoding of the bit stream for compression, but where is that happening? And is everything prior to that uncompressed as far as bit rate reduction?
No, because we're transmitting the signal to the site via satellite. We're compressing over the satellite. So the source material is coming from Westwood One Denver, and it's MP2 stereo, I believe, and it is a stereo signal on the AM digital, by the way. And we built some promos that actually included music to demonstrate that it does sound better. So if you listen to the station, you go to, you know, you can listen over the stream as well. But I brought my little, you know, oscilloscope with the Les Ajou on there just to make sure that it was actually doing it. And you can plug it into that Sangean receiver and see that it is in fact stereo. So we're compressed over the satellite in MP2. It goes out of the satellite receiver as AES audio into the telos, and then from there out to the transmitter as AES. As far as the encoding of the digital signal, it's happening in the importer-exporter that came from Nautel.
And there are no transcoding issues between encode, decode, and re-encode?
Not that I can tell. Sounds pretty clean.
Good, thank you.
Conrad, I commend Cumulus for doing this experiment, and obviously doing it in the New York market must have been very expensive. What is the company's long-term goal of this test? I mean, I know the engineering-wise what you accomplished, but let's face it, the radio industry is more controlled by the sales market and everything. What are they looking at, and when will they consider this a success?
I thought that somebody might ask me that question, and it's too soon for me to answer. What I will tell you is that we did do this as an experiment. We did want to see what it would do for us from a signal point of view. We wanted to prove the technology. I mean, Dave had already done that with WWFD, but you know, here, this was, you know, I call it my little 1 kilowatt pea shooter in the, you know, suburbs of New York. I wanted to see if we could expand that signal out and get additional coverage. And with the grade A coverage making it out to the half mil, it added something like 8 million people in population. If you do the VSoft study and look at the population within our 2 mil versus the half mil, you know, it more than doubles the number of people you can reach. So, you know, that's something that we wanted to see if we could accomplish, which we were able to. As far as the business aspects of this, I'm not prepared to talk about any of that at this point. We're still in evaluation mode. It's still early on. You know, we only put the station on in May. So I'm sure that when we're ready to talk about that, you know, there will be some sort of, you know, official announcement or something. So,
you mentioned earlier, I think, that about 40% of the cars had receivers capable of receiving this. And as old cars are replaced, we expect that to increase. But then some manufacturers are dropping AM entirely. So we're going to see some sort of a peak in AM receivers or digital receivers.
You know, that would be a question for Joe D'Angelo and the folks at Xperi, but you know, I was disappointed that the new car that I recently got doesn't have AM in it. It's you know, and when you push back and you say, well, how am I supposed to listen to the CDS, or you know, I want to get my news and weather in the morning, their answer is tune it in on the app. And I'm like, well, it's not on the app. Well, you can get it on your phone, and your phone can connect through Bluetooth on the thing. So, it's one more step in the push towards streaming. And, Cumulus has made a very strong push to make sure that our streaming and podcasting platforms are solid, and we recognize that people are moving in that direction. But at the same time, over the air radio listening is important, and we were able to prove that a station that had 0 listeners and no ppm meters being encoded and nobody listening on the stream now can hear us, and they're tuning in.
Conrad, let me ask you about the Nortel transmitter that you installed, assuming that the BE wouldn't handle the MA3 and the Nortel does. What kind of experience did you have in getting a transmitter that would handle the digital?
You're right. So the folks at BE are pretty much admitted that theirs can't handle the pure MA3. Gates Air no longer manufactures an AM transmitter, so we went to Nortel, clearly seeing the success that Dave Kolasar had in Maryland with it. We went that route, and we're very pleased with it. It's performing well. It's rock solid on the air. Somebody, I saw a text pop up saying they were asking if there was a translator. There is no FM translator with this. It's just pure AM. So.
Conrad, one thing that I've often wondered is, has there been any studies for an all digital AM to either go Xperi HD as you have, or possibly utilizing DRM, which in my opinion probably would have sounded really clean, and it's out there for shortwave. I was wondering, has it been looked at for AM?
Not to my knowledge.
I don't think it's authorized by the FCC for AM.
I'd also point out that there are 0 receivers for DRM on AM. So you would be starting from, I don't think AM has time if you want to change standards. So the HD MA3 system, if you want to go digital, is what you got. And DRM would be starting over, and I don't think the band has that much time.
Well, and also is in DRM, is the bit reduction scheme built into the standard? I thought DRM was mostly the transmission interface. Basically, it's the modem. What data coding you use in front of that is flexible, or could be anything.
I think you can reduce the data rate on DRM. I guess so that you can it can accommodate terrible antennas better than MA3 could. But if you're talking about a data rate reduction, you're also talking about a sound quality reduction as well.
Well, right. And Dave Bialik had said, it might sound better. I think DRM is mostly the modem to get it from point A to point B. What processing you put on the other side of it, that's sort of a user decision.
That we're built. I'm sorry. The receiver market seems to be international, and it's also very software driven. So I wonder if the fact that DRM receivers are available in other countries. I think India just did something with a medium wave huge transmitter, 500 kilowatts or something. Is there going to by default be DRM receivers in the US, and perhaps are there some already? We just don't know it. I see somebody shaking their head.
Didn't Canada just drop it?
I could comment a little bit about DRM from the standpoint of our experience. Excuse me, Harold mentioned India. India have are the one country that have committed to DRM and medium wave and FM for the whole country. And they have sites all over the country that are DRM, operating DRM every day. And cars are coming on the market. They have, I think, 2.5 to 3 million, more than that, I know now, cars with DRM receivers in them. All the cars that are being built in India have DRM receivers. And other countries have adopted DRM. And there are a pretty wide range of receivers available for DRM now. And there is a company based in Pennsylvania and Panama called Titus Radio that developed DRM receivers on a platform that's very versatile. And it's a software-defined receiver. So there are receivers available, but I agree with David, you know, that I think our country is too far down the road of HD to think about anything else at this point. Internationally, it's a different story.
Curious to know what Conrad, Dave, and anybody else think about the, and maybe you two gentlemen can talk about the cost and return on investment, because for a small market, maybe a single station owner who only owns one local, say 5 kilowatt station, what sort of expectation they might have as a result of going HD on the AM with an FM translator available.
Well, at the WWFD, we actually have that situation because we're a 4.3 kilowatt day daytime signal, 430 watts night, and we do have an FM translator. We have had the FM translator. We had it for a couple years before we went MA3, and we had no ratings even with the translator. Again, because the translator, it's our translator, I think, is 130 watts ERP. And it covers our city of license. It covers Frederick. But as soon as we turned on MA3, we started up in the Nielsen ratings with I believe a half share in the Frederick market. That didn't happen with the translator. So what we believe happened is just because since our daytime footprint was so much larger than the translator, we ended up picking up a lot more of an audience. And remember, WWFD is a music format. So before we went digital, the AM was little more than a legal justification for the FM translator. And now the AM as an MA3 signal can stand on its own in terms of being a valid choice for listeners. So what we've essentially done is increased our footprint by using the AM as a digital station rather than just as a legal justification for a tiny translator. So it increases your options for programming. So I don't know if we would have had the same results, you know, on a talk format, because you could still listen to talk, you know, on an analog AM station. But for music, it certainly made a difference for us.
Do you still have the translator?
We still do have the translator. Yes, yes, and listener comments seem to be coming in. I mean, it's hard to tell. We don't encode them separately, but our listeners tend to be, I want to say our listener feedback tends to be, I'm just going to take a guess, maybe 60-40 or 75-25 between the AM and the translator.
I think separate encoding would be really interesting.
It would be. It's just something that we don't have. We, you know, just because of the way our air chain is wired.
What has been the expense of converting to a solid digital signal from analog, and what seems to be the ROI? A good question for Conrad and for Dave.
Well, the cost is really just that of a transmitter, and then you add the cost of the importer exporter on top of that. So really, what you're talking about is just really the cost of a new transmitter, and that's of course assuming that your antenna system is
Broadband.
up to snuff. I mean,
Right.
if not, then you could either have your antenna system redesigned, or what we did was Mike Raid and I sort of as our little hobby, we rebuilt the phaser ourselves under Tom King's guidance. Kintronics designed a modified system for us, which we implemented. So it can be, if you're willing to get your hands dirty, the cost isn't that much. But of course, you can have Kintronics, Space Tech, whoever, design a whole new antenna system for you.
Are we looking at $10,000, 15, 20, 30, 50? What are we looking at here?
Well, for the cost of an importer exporter and an X-Gen card in the transmitter, I guess that would run you maybe about 15 or so. And then of course there's the cost to retrofit the antenna system. And if you're a standalone AM with a significant listenership already, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to blow up your existing analog listeners and go MA3, where I think MA3, we're in the stage where, it's the early the early adopters are going to be people that, don't have a large established listenership right now. I mean, WWFD had not shown up in the ratings for 10 years. So that makes it a perfect candidate to build audience from anew.
So if you don't have anything to lose, you've got everything to gain.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not going to make sense for everybody, but I think if you're an AM that doesn't have a lot to lose, and let's face it, there's a lot of them out there now, this might be an option for you, especially if there's a significant amount of receivers in the market. In our market, when we converted about a third of listeners, about a third of cars on the road in our market had HD. So it made sense for us to give it a try.
Everything that Dave said.
I know we had a representative from Xperi here, and I'm aware of the Sangean HD14 and 16 as portable radios.
Those are the two, yeah.
Maybe there are more, and he could say anything if he's able to.
So are you looking for exact models of table radios or portable radios?
Well, the question earlier was, were there portable radios that could be gotten? And obviously a portable radio can be a table radio if necessary, but
yeah, the two Sangeans that you mentioned are portables, and then there's also the AudioVox TX2, which has the emergency alerts capability as well. Those are the only portables. And as far as portables and table radios are concerned, to put it delicately but bluntly, if there was a market for them, we would make them, or other manufacturers would make them. Our feedback is nobody's buying them, ergo nobody's going to make them. And that's just the fact of the matter. That's pretty much what I can say as far as table radios are concerned. Our CEO said it best. Our former CEO, he would say, people aren't buying radios. People are buying things with radios in them. And that's where you have to be. Buying a table radio with an alarm clock or an alarm clock radio, that has been replaced by, Alexa stream WTOP. And, it gets it. And then say, Alexa set alarm for 6 a.m. That's, as Dave said, that's where, and Conrad said, that's where it's going with in the industry. That home is getting taken over by streaming devices.
Even for FM, because Boston Acoustics, Radiosophy, these manufacturers have faded away.
Yeah.
Sea Crane, that was the other, the manufacturer that I had reached out to.
Right.
I was like, you guys have the perfect opportunity here. They're like, well, we put our foot in the water and took it back out. So.
Yeah, well, we found that, most all of our listening to WWFD is done in the car, where HD radios are and where terrestrial over-the-air broadcasting still has significant penetration. And what has happened is that we found that when people get out of the car, they then tell their smart speaker, or they, dial up our stream on their phone. So we get people to sample our station, the gamut, in the car, and then they, as soon as they get out of the car, they take it with them on either their phone or their smart speaker. So since all digital AM meets the modern listener's expectations of what a stream should sound like, or what an audio program should sound like, it sounds as good as an AAC stream. It has the metadata on it. It has album artwork and station logos. It looks and feels and sounds just like streaming. So we've gotten those listeners in the car, and then they just take it with them into the home or onto the phone, with other devices. And so MA3 has reinforced and directed people towards our stream as well. So we find that it's a very good piece of our digital strategy.
How do the receivers work inside typical homes? Has anybody looked at that? Because I know the hybrid system, once you tried to have an antenna inside as opposed to on your car, it didn't work quite as well.
One of my colleagues lives in New York. I'm trying to remember the exact town, but far enough away that what am I trying to say? I sent this colleague one of these Sangean radios. I said, tune this in, and they said it worked great in my living room. And then I went to the kitchen and it didn't work so great. And I said, did you orient the radio so that the AM was strong? Remember, you would take an AM and tune it in and it'd be noise in it. And if you turned it like 90 degrees, it would clear up. I said, you have to do that because the signal's still coming in and you have to, adjust where the radio is sitting. But people don't think that because, the Alexa doesn't need to be oriented for reception, but a radio does. And as soon as I said that, this person twisted the radio a little bit and was like, oh, there it is, came in nice and clear. So, you can't hear that you're going from a noisy signal to a not so noisy signal by orienting the radio because it's digital. It's either there or it's not there. So when it's not there, you have to move the radio around a little bit in order to get it to come in. So I thought that was an interesting, it's like a new problem
We
So-
need to get radios with those magic eyes on them like they used to have. So
Exactly.
Or a bit error rate meter. With latency and so on, it must be fun trying to adjust for the best reception.
Yeah.
When I live in the 0.3 millivolt daytime contour of WWFD, and with a Sangean radio with an external loop antenna, with a Turk loop antenna that's tunable. If I stick it in the window, I can pick up WWFD just fine. But I wouldn't expect anybody to go through that. I mean, when I tell listeners how to pick up the signal, I tell people 820 in the car, and then just pick it up on our stream when you get home.
Which is pretty much our guidance as well.
I'll just kick this back in again for receivers in general. Maybe you remember was it called Black Spot, something like that. It was a headset that plugged into an iPhone and was a radio, and they didn't have HD. And I asked them, and they said, well, we're working on it. And we've never heard from them again.
That does bring up licensing and continuing payment requirements. Is the licensing covered in the initial purchase, or is there a continuing fee for broadcasting this?
On the broadcaster or receiver side?
Both sides.
On the broadcaster side, Xperi currently is waiving. If the station goes from analog directly to MA3, we are waiving the licensing fee. Normally that fee to go from analog to MA1 is $7,500 one time. We're waiving that fee for anyone who wants to go MA3. You can send in the licensing agreement, and once that licensing agreement is signed, it's good in perpetuity. So it's not where there's a gotcha, we can come back at you 10 years later and say, aha, pay us our money. That license is free, and it's free in perpetuity. On the receive side, it's still the standard model where we charge, X number of dollars and cents per unit or per radio that's manufactured. There is no licensing fee to the end user. They buy the radio, they turn it on, they get HD.
That's great. The one-time fee, even a one-time fee of $7,500, it seems fairly reasonable. It almost seems as though that should just be covered by the transmitter manufacturer and as part of the transmitter.
Usually it's baked in.
Yeah.
But we're waiving the licensing fee. We're not telling the manufacturers to charge your customers and then report that royalty back to us. We're waiving that fee. Just, you get the license directly from us, and it's good in perpetuity.
Thank you.
So even if you never convert, or you convert 5 years from now, you sign the license agreement, you don't have to, there's no gun to anybody's head. You got to do this by X, it's free, but you got to do it by X number of days or months or years. You can have that in your back pocket for 10 years and then decide to turn it on. It's still the license.
But I sure appreciate Conrad and Dave both.
Thanks for having us. And Dave, thank you for hopping on along with me. As I said at the beginning, you're the trailblazer. I'm just coming up behind you there. So
thanks. I wouldn't miss the opportunity to show off the hobby horse,
And we will, and I'll also point folks to your presentation again, Dave. Conrad, I'd like to invite you and Dave back after a period of time as this shakes down, and you can tell us how everything's working in what, 6 months or so, what the results are, if any, that are different. Certainly have an open invitation.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I'm actually really excited about the AutoStage platform because with hybrid systems like that, this gives AM stations an opportunity to be in those platforms, whereas an analog AM signal has no way of getting into a platform such as AutoStage. So I think that MA3 has a significant role to play in terms of getting AM broadcasters into that platform.
Interesting.
I'd be really excited to hear to work with Xperi about that.
So Barry, once again, thank you very much for putting this together, and I really appreciate everyone participating. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. It was fun to do.
That's the goal. Have some fun, learn something.
Well, it's nice to see everybody. I see a lot of names I recognize on the screen here. So thanks for coming and listening to the story.
All right.
Thank you, Barry and Conrad. Great presentation, great dialogue. I also learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.